I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. And yesterday was my 69th birthday. The title of this episode is Coming into My Cronage. I'm going to see if I can change up that idea of the crone with some help from Artemis Forest Fairy and a book called The Crone Zone. Also, Isaac Middle with the Astrology from Down the Wombat Hole, more of A Course in Goddess, and then looking at sex and the crone. Let's do this. In looking at the word crone, something I observed is that it is CR1 or seer one. And that, I think, is the essence. It's someone who is at a time of life and enough experience to be seeing, to be really focused on seeing and not so much focused on doing. Let's see what Artemis Forest Fairy has to say in her excellent article, The Psychic Landscape of the Crone. There has been a great forgetting, and there is much sadness and loss in these words. There is also, to my right, a great portal, where a powerful energy pulls everything into it, like a great black hole. And this is how the future is made. You are always throwing stuff down it, and you do not know. A crone can send something on purpose, a few seconds of information maybe, and of her history. What she witnessed that should be remembered. You have been sending thought forms, narratives, and beliefs down there unconsciously enough as it is, some of which should probably be undone. To protect the future generations, be aware. Rituals and times of year really do come into play here, especially the moon phases. Also, if you have not dealt with your shadow to a very high degree, don't even try it. You have no idea how much you can suffer when that trickster slips a spin on what you thought was a perfectly good idea. It may be this is only safe for crones. And then this is the ritual. By the midnight, by the moon, send this memory through the womb. By the heart, by the blood, know the truth for the good. By the starlight, by the song, may this knowing make you strong. By the water, by the well, keep this insight dark and fell. I the crone, I the crown, northern sorceress of renown. By the thorn, by the seed, craft the wit to the need. By the focus, by the will, drum and fire, forge it real. By the silver thread of night, gifts are woven strong and bright. By the portal I command, take this knowledge in your hands. I'll have that linked in the Substack episode, and also one from my mystic sister, Barbara Sinclair, on a post from the Quaking Poplar called My World of Woo. She first called it Embracing the Woo, and then found that someone else had just posted something the very night that she was doing this, and they went into the etymology of the word woo. This comes from ancient China, and this word woo in ancient China meant female, shaman, healer, and herbalist. So really, this word woo is a word for the class of women who were incredibly powerful and held power through their ability to be in connection with the non-physical world, with the spirit world, to be in connection with the healing power of the plants, and with their own intuition. And so this sacred term for this sacred class of people was taken by the West and twisted into something that was ungrounded, that was shameful, that was out there. And why I say this is because embracing our woo is a reclamation. And that is by Asia Suler. I picked up the book The Crone Zone by Nina Bargil in anticipation of this episode. But to be honest, I expected that it was going to be something kind of trendy and schlocky or deep wisdom. And honestly, it is sassy and witty. And even though she's only 51 at this writing, which is barely a crone, not writing from experience yet, but I am really enjoying it and finding it very insightful. She says there are 3 touchstones of the crone, which is wisdom, knowledge, and fuck it. And that last one is so important because you need to find your crone voice and say no to all the people who want your time. It talks about making yourself useless. I am so good at that. And having time alone, the crone alone is one of her titles. That seems to be coming across for many of my fellow stackers. Kathleen Devaney, I think of as key among those, that we are all backing up a bit and finding ourselves less engaged and squandering the time that really is our essence and ours to squander. Nina talks about the goddess Hecate, whose 3 faces were the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and how that had a different meaning in ancient Greece. And then the mythographer Robert Graves came along and decided that that meant young and hot, mommy, or old and useless. In her words, you can be a fucking goddess for more than 2,000 years, and suddenly some guy comes along and says, you're useless, and that's that. She also talks about Snow White's evil stepmother, saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And then being taken aback when she is no longer the fairest, because that is the image that she's attached to. And she disguises herself as the hag, as the crone, and sneaks in to Snow White's life in that way. But the crone is really where the power is, not in the babe who's still competing with the maidens. And for my birthday, my salsa buddy Maria gave me this card that she had designed many years ago with her husband. For myself, I realized that I had been the maiden for 34 years because I had my oldest child at the age of 35. And then, up to 68, I have been another 34 years in the role of mother. I think that this is high time for me to enter my Cronage, because if I were to live another 34 years, that would make me 103. And why not? And a lovely birthday surprise was from Isaac Middle, who gifted me with an astrology reading for my solar return. This is so interesting because Isaac is doing Astrology 2.0, the goddess version. So looking at all the patriarchal symbols that have been put in there and how that has usurped the real and true meaning of it. One thing I think about is that the sign Taurus as the bull should really have been Bot. Bot was the Egyptian cow goddess, and that gets turned into Baal, Baal, the god of sacrifice and bloodlust. So all the time, what I've been seeing is that the goddesses end up being usurped, turned male, and then turned into this false mock battle between 2 different versions of the male, because the female wasn't even worth being a villain, could only be something that was turned into a gentle, pliant protector of the male. Taurus is an Aramaic word and is where the word Torah comes from, T-O-R-A. And isn't that interesting? With the same word for the guidebook to the bloodthirsty God Yahweh. Isaac is looking at the fixed luminaries, and one of those is Algol. And Algol is the Medusa head. This he sees as being the ultimate symbol of the goddess energy that gets usurped, where her head is cut off and then turned into being a shield for the masculine. So there's usurping the feminine power and using that power in a way that no longer serves the female, but instead becomes part of the protection of the male. Isaac also looks at Juno, the wronged wife of Zeus, and then at Lilith, the dark mistress of the moon. And he says, "And you, to no one's surprise, dear, have a focus on Lilith." And he shows where there's an evolutionary trine that is leading towards Lilith in my house of service and right next to Chiron. And so this is looking at the dark mistress as work, as taking on the conflict, the challenges, doing the unpopular work of saying the things that no one really wants to hear, and doing it because someone has to. Of course. That work is the true work and is part of making yourself useless. I went to the dentist today and talked about this procedure, and they said, well, this could really knock you out for a couple of days, so if you need a note from us for your employer. And I thought, what kind of world is this, where a 69-year-old woman may need a note from her dentist in order to take 2 days off from work? How horrible is it that things have come to that we have been kept so busy that we never have time to be useless. Now let's look at lessons 21 to 30 from A Course in Miracles that I've been translating into A Course in Goddess. I am determined to see things differently. What I see is a form of vengeance. I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. I do not perceive my own best interest. I do not know what anything is for. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. Above all else, I want to see. Above all else, I want to see things differently. Goddess is in everything I see. Goddess is in everything I see because Goddess is in my mind. This decade of the Course is all about seeing. It's no longer about doing. And that's where I think the crone comes in, because that is the seer one. All we need to do is change our mind by releasing ourselves from thinking that we have to do anything, because we don't even know. We don't even know what it is that we need to do. We're not the ones in charge, and that is such a good thing. The reason that you stop attacking other people is because that ends up being reciprocal. That blame creates guilt, and you can't escape from that as long as you're placing that blame on other people. We need conflict. We need the conflict of ideas, and to keep making sure that our thoughts are being consistent. But we don't need to convince anyone else. We don't need to do anything about it. We do not know what anything is for. And so letting go of that conflict is something that the crone can do at this point in her life. Say, fuck it. Now let's talk about sex and the crone, because you know you want to. As listeners know, my latest passion has been salsa dancing. Salsa dancing is so fun because it mixes up things like gender, height, body shapes, but most importantly, age. That people are dancing with all kinds of different inappropriate partners and having a good time. Because salsa dancing involves men and close proximity to men and being touched by men, and it creates a different level of physicality that is easy, that's comfortable. And so I think that that is a signal to other women that this guy, who I'm not in any mating dance with, is goddess endorsed, is someone you might want to get to know if you are in that mating dance, because they are someone who relates to women. That's what I think was the ancient method of those roles, that really the high priestess was a crone. She was past those childbearing ages. She was in a ritual position where I think that the priestesses were probably the ones who did initiate men, because the women of childbearing age had high stakes involved. In order to have sex with someone, and we're talking about a freedom to do that, you needed to know that you were willing to deal with the consequences of having a baby. And so the women who were the priestesses, I think, were probably the ones who taught men how to be a good partner and found out who was really worthy of being with the women who were ready to bear children. And I think it's just as likely that the priestess crone said, "Fuck it. Learn on your own time. I am done with being useful and being used by anyone else. This is my time to come into a room of one's crone." Welcome to the Cronage. For more, here is a fun one called the Socks Box Miracle that also talks about I do not know what anything is for. And this is Luna Plots a Revolution from Isaac's reading of my astrology chart 2 solar returns ago. Thank you for watching.